Sri Lanka's Tamil tiger guerrillas have a reputation as perhaps the world's most single-minded militants. They've shown they're prepared to fight to the death, with suicide bombing their trademark. But today, they've been given the day off. They're on their way to a picnic because now there's real hope that peace talks with the government are about to begin.
சண்டநிறுத்தம் எங்களோட மக்களுக்கு ஒரு நல்ல சுமமான ஒரு தீர்வை கொடுக்குமென்று அரசாங்கத்தின் மீது உள்ள நம்பிக்கையால் நல்ல இடம் நினைக்கிறோம்.
I think the government realizes that we cannot go on with the war, that the world has no patience with us, the country has no patience with us, and similarly the LTT is realizing it. So I think the international climate is what is forcing both sides to look for compromise.
For 2 decades, the Tigers have waged pitch battle with government forces for a separate Tamil state. This show of force demonstrates just what a high-tech, high-velocity war it has been. In what's been Asia's most intractable conflict, more than 60,000 people have been killed, tens of thousands more have been injured, and millions of people have been made homeless. Much of an entire generation has been lost as the Tigers have fought to establish Elam, a state free of Sri Lanka and its Sinhalese majority. Now, the first concession towards peace appears to have been made, with the Tigers' second-in-charge and official spokesman backing away from the movement's long-held demand for a separate state. Instead, he's calling for a homeland, which would remain part of a federated Sri Lanka.
நிலைமை எங்களுக்கு ஏற்பட்டிருக்கா என்பதை தான் நான் பல தடவை அதை வெளிப்படுத்தி இருக்கிறேன். இந்த முறையும் இலங்கை அரசாங்கம் எங்களை பொறுத்தவரையில் எங்களோட வடகிழக்கு எங்களுடைய தாயக பிரதேசத்தில் நாங்கள் சுதந்திரமாக உரிமைகளோட கௌரவமாக வாழுவது தான் அடிப்படையானது. அப்போ அதை நோக்கிய ஒரு தீர்வை இலங்கை அரசாங்கம் முன்வைக்கின்ற சூழலில் நான் இதுக்கான பதிலை எங்களோட அமைப்பு அதிகாரபூர்வமாக இது சம்பந்தமான கருத்துக்களை சொல்கிற சூழ்நிலை தோன்றும் என்று நான் நினைக்கிறேன்.
But the reality of years of isolation in Tamil-controlled territory is that a parallel state within the state has already been created. In this divided island, Tamils claim and control much of the north and east of the country, the government the south. Melinda Moragada is Sri Lanka's Minister for Economic Reform, but more significantly, he's one of 2 ministers charged with leading the government's push for peace.
We have created almost 2 states within a state, and we have and that is what we are trying to correct in a way with this peace process and the ceasefire. And that is to say, these are not 2 separate states, it's all one country at least, and one society.
A ceasefire agreement was signed last month. Putting the pen to paper for the Tigers was its enigmatic leader, Vellapillai Prabhakaran. The Tigers' founder and hero of the movement does not give interviews. But this military leader is poised to become a political force as peace talks between the government and the Tigers are soon set to begin. In Tiger-controlled territory, the only hope for anything resembling decent medical care is to get out. But that has not always been possible.
I was reported that he has a skin disease, red eyes and something in trouble. So he's under drip and okay, so it's sort of emergency.
Today the border is being eased open, allowing a rare glimpse at the world the tigers have created. The flow of people from tiger-controlled territory to government soil has increased in recent weeks. For the first time in almost a decade, government restrictions on many basic items, including bicycles and fuel, have been lifted.
Less items are restricted. For instance, previously batteries, you see small batteries for any radio and so on in the world, were forbidden. So soldiers had to check deeply in the bags to find those batteries. Now it is allowed.
It's in part an admission by the government that its embargo, aimed at starving the guerrillas of supplies, has exacted a huge toll on the civilian population.
We can see it, the areas under LTT control have suffered, the people in those areas have suffered through the lack of food, medication, fuel, building materials for their houses, education. So as a result, you have created two classes of citizens in this country. One class that is basically has access to all these things, and another class that doesn't. And I think in that process, we are further creating a sense of resentment among those people living in those areas.
This remains very much frontline territory. While the ceasefire has helped ease tensions, mistrust between bitter foes remains high. For the past decade, General Puthukudiyirrppu has participated in and overseen some of the military's most fierce campaigns waged against the guerrillas.
Don't forget, we are not dropped the guard. We are prepared. Because until now, as I told you earlier, it is just the beginning of this peace initiative.
This journey into tiger territory has only recently become possible. For almost a decade, the Vani, as the tiger's stronghold is named, was off-limits to outsiders. As fighting raged in the Vani and the tigers consolidated their control, it was simply too dangerous to cross over, and the government restricted prying media eyes.
Yes, can on channel 2?
Now the Red Cross monitors this buffer zone, seeking to ensure the safety of civilian travellers and truck convoys.
This lady journalist is finally crossing in with a vehicle. Do I advise her to stop with the white flag, or there's no problem with her? There's no problem for they already saying.
Almost a decade of economic isolation and the shattering impact of this war have blighted the landscape. The Vani is a region of dusty towns and villages connected by cratered dirt tracks. An estimated 200 to 400,000 people live here. Thousands more have fled. Everywhere there are shell-shattered buildings and people. Over the years of ferocious fighting, front lines have shifted many times as ground has been won and lost over and over. In the northern town of Kilinoche, only a very few buildings remain intact. This temple escaped the worst of the ravages of war, but its battle scars are obvious.
சமாதானத்தை விரும்புகிறேன்னு தானே, அதாவது இனிமேல் மன சண்டை இல்லாமல் சமாதானம் தாங்கள் நல்லபடியாக ஆண்டவன் டைம் அதை தான் கேட்கணும்.
In the past decade, there has been little repair work, let alone construction, almost anywhere in the Vani. Military graveyards and heroes' rest houses, as the Tigers' memorials to the dead are called, are the exception to the rule.
சர்வதேச நிதி வழங்குனர்களின் உதவியுடன்
Over the years, it's been the Tigers' leader, Prabhakaran, who has been the guiding light of the movement. It is he who is held responsible for such earlier tactical decisions as turning Tamil youth into child militants. Under his leadership, women on the front line have equal rights to life and death.
This is the Visual Martyr Crematorium, and it's one of the big crematorium in Tamilam, and here are about 3,000 odd martyrs.
Tendril joined the movement when she was 19. A former frontline militant, she has been assigned to guide me during my time in this world where Prabhakaran reigns supreme. She is a veteran of more battles than she can remember.
I remember those people when they were alive. For example, if I know this Carter, sometimes I'll happen to cry even. That's it.
Tendril was given 2 items the day she finished basic training. One was her identity number, the other her very own cyanide pill to swallow in the event of capture. For now, she has chosen to leave that behind at her base camp.
Since ceasefire period, and I'm working with a journalist like you, I thought it is better to leave the cyanide capsule.
While many of the rebels believe they are alive today due to the sacrifices of the movement's martyrs, others have turned to faith to survive. The Catholic Church at Madhu continues to provide sanctuary to thousands of families forced to flee during the many waves of this conflict. Our Lady of Madhu is the largest and most intact building in all of the Vani. Although recognised as a protected haven by both sides, it took a direct hit in the fighting.
It was very dark and people were there and the church crowded and there were in tension, fear and all that. We hear the bombing and shelling, the sound of the bombing and shelling, and immediately a shell came and fell on the roof of the corner side of the church here in Madhu. And all the people who were there all just went into pieces, and on the spot about 39 people dead.
Many of the more than 10,000 families who have sought refuge in Madhu have now lived here for most of their children's lives. But there appears to be one point of common ground amongst all who have been forced from their homes over and over again.
அந்த எண்ணம் இல்லை, எவ்வளோ விரைவாக சொந்த இடத்துக்கு போகலுமோ அவ்வளோ விரைவாக போகணுன்னு தான் எதிர்பார்க்குறோம். ஒரு சமாதானம் விரைவில் எட்டப்பட்டு நாங்கள் போயிருக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு சூழல் வந்தால் நிச்சயமாக விரைவாக போகிறதுக்கு நாங்கள் ஆயத்தமாக இருக்கோம்.
Madhu is the centre of operations for many international agencies. With the ceasefire comes hope that agencies will now be able to evaluate and assist those most in need.
Electricity is not, the power grid doesn't extend that way. You don't have telephone networks. You don't have road repair that's taken place. Again, as a phenomenon of the conflict and the ongoing struggle between the government and the LTTE, that's fundamentally constrained any development efforts.
In this most recent attempt at finding peace, it was the Tamil Tigers who made the first move. They announced a ceasefire a few months ago on Christmas Eve. The Tigers had become a target in the aftermath of America's so-called global war on terror.
I think there is a general fatigue on both sides. I think the international climate itself has changed since September 11th. I think that's something also that has to be understood, and I think that impacts the whole situation as well.
அதாவது கடந்த காலங்களுக்கு இந்த சமாதான முயற்சிகள் முன்னேற்றம் அடைந்து கொண்டு போயிருக்க சிங்கள பகுதியில் உள்ள சிங்கள இனவாதிகள், தமிழ் விரோத போக்கு கொண்டவர்கள், இவர்களுடைய எதிர்ப்புகளுக்கு அஞ்சி ஒவ்வொரு அரசாங்கங்களும் தாங்கள் எடுத்த முயற்சிகளை ஒப்பந்தங்களையும் நிராகரித்து முடிவுக்கு கொண்டு வந்த வரலாறுகள் இருக்குது. அப்போ இந்த முறையும் சர்வதேச மத்தியத்துவத்துடன் நடக்கிறபடியால் ஓரளவு எங்களுடைய மக்களின் மனங்களில் ஓரளவு நம்பிக்கை இருக்கின்றது.
In December, Australia added the Tigers to its list of banned organisations. In this remote corner of Sri Lanka, without electricity or phone lines, Canberra's decision did not go unnoticed amongst the movement's foot soldiers. These guerrillas, each and every one a seasoned fighter, were not happy about being labelled terrorists. And upon hearing I was Australian, they called for that message to be relayed to Canberra.
மக்கள் சுதந்திரமாக விடுபட்டு கொண்டிருக்கக்குள்ள ஆஸ்திரேலியா அரசாங்கம் உண்மையில் இந்த போராட்டத்தை அங்கீகரித்து இந்த விடுதலைக்கு முழு பங்களிப்பை செய்து எங்களோட மக்களின் துன்ப துயரங்களை போக்காட்டுறதுக்கு இலங்கை அரசாங்கத்துக்கு அழுத்தம் கொடுத்து மேன்மேலும் எங்களோட போராட்டத்தை ஆதரிக்க வேண்டும் என்று கேட்டு நிறைவு செய்கிறேன்.
Across the border, Sri Lankan soldiers continue to patrol wearing heavy bulletproof vests. In Tiger territory, security concerns are much more relaxed. These guerrillas are on their way to a picnic, but first they have to call in on a village which has arranged a thank you ceremony for their efforts over the past year. The names of those who have achieved martyrdom in the past year are duly honoured. At the height of this conflict, Sri Lanka's army swelled in size to 100,000 men and women. But the Tigers' military strength has never been thought to be more than between 5,000 and 10,000. And while there's no doubt the guerrillas have strong backing among many Tamils who applaud their military exploits, the same support does not necessarily extend to their efforts at civil society. The outside world has had little chance to observe these institutions at work.
I mean, we're aware, obviously, of the fact that the LTT was operating a court system, that there are LTT police that were operating there. But in terms of our ability to better understand that system entirety, we've not been able to do that.
But the movement that gives its young guerrillas cyanide pills to swallow in the event of capture is now in charm mode. And in an attempt to show it is more than simply a guerrilla force, the Tigers agreed to allow Dateline previously unheard of access to a day in their court. It's just one small but significant example of how far the Tigers of Tamil Elam have been able to pursue their desire for a separate state.
பிரித்தானிய சட்டத்தின் அடிப்படையில் அதிலிருந்து தழுவி இப்போ எங்களுடைய கலாச்சாரத்துக்கு ஏற்ற வகையிலே எங்களுடைய மக்களுடைய நடைமுறைக்கு ஏற்ற வகையிலே எங்களுடைய சமூகத்தை ஒழுங்குபடுத்தக்கூடிய வகையில் சட்டங்களை நாங்கள் உருவாக்கி இருக்கிறோம். யுஎன்ஓ சாசன விதிகளையும் தழுவி இந்த சட்டத்தை நாங்கள் உருவாக்கி.
Today there are no big-time offenders. At day's end, only one man will be returned to police custody. But that does not mean this is a lenient court. In fact, it's the reverse. Sri Lanka no longer imposes the death penalty, but the Tamil court of Elam does. Its judges are all former serving Tiger cadres. Only they are permitted to be elevated to the bench. A decision decreed by the movement's leader, Prabhakaran. Handing down the death penalty did not disturb this former frontline fighter who was promoted to the position at the ripe old age of 23.
இனிமேல் அது சம்பந்தமாக அவருக்கு தண்டனையாக அளிக்கப்படையக்குள்ள எனக்கு அது ஒரு பிரச்சனையாகவும் தெரியல. நான் சரியான ஒரு நீதி வழங்கியிருக்கிறேன்னு சொல்லி ஒரு சிந்தனை மட்டும்தான் எனக்கு.
The Tigers maintain the decision to build their own legal system was driven by necessity rather than design. Its Tamil Law School was created 6 years ago, soon after the region was cut off by the war. There are plans for a high court. The Tigers maintain that people here are grateful for their judicial efforts, while in the company of my guide, no one was willing to say anything else. A police service has also been created, but here Tiger militants are not welcome, for this is a civilian service. Now, due to the ceasefire, some of the physical barriers that have isolated the Tamils are being removed. Today, a new border crossing post is about to open on the front line. On the government side, military bases are being camouflaged as civilians are given right of passage to travel down this road for the first time in more than a decade. It is a major military concession from the Sri Lankan army, for this is the main highway to Jaffna. It has long been used as the military's main supply line.
Hello, JC. So they'll be sending this lorry to test the turning in a few minutes. Over.
Okay, that you have the green light, just do it. Over.
The Sri Lankan army knows what's at stake, but its chief, General Lionel Balagal, insists it's a journey the military is prepared and wants to make.
It will take a lot of time. It has to be done step by step. And there will be misunderstandings, there will be shortcomings, there will be problems on our side as well. But we try to correct it through discussion, through talks, as far as possible.
And today, as much as the government wanted to put its spin on proceedings, so too did the Tigers. Media were invited to cross over and speak to them. Tamil political parties have endorsed the guerrillas as the sole voice in any peace process. While they may be dressed for battle, this day was more about promoting themselves as a political force. The opportunity was seized to once more raise concern about being labelled as terrorists.
அவருடைய விடுதலைக்காக போராடுகின்ற அமைப்பு. எனவே இந்த ஆஸ்திரேலியா அரசாங்கம் எங்களை தடை செய்தது என்பது மிகுந்த வேதனை அளிக்கின்ற ஒன்றாகவே அமைகின்றது.
As barriers are being brought down and roads opened up, the true cost of this war is only now being made public. This road extends all the way to government-controlled Jaffna, but it is not possible to go that far just yet. For this highway has not been completely cleared of landmines. The Tigers agree to escort me to Elephant Pass and beyond. This strategic narrow strip of land has been lost and won by both sides numerous times. Palai is as far as Tendril, my Tiger guide, is able to negotiate for me to go. No outsider has been allowed to travel this far in recent times.
This territory was captured and lost and captured for 3 or 4 times, and now this area was fully under control by the Tigers.
Tamil Tiger militants are the only inhabitants of this town. But it's not just uncertainty about the peace process that's keeping former residents away.
People have not yet come to settle down in these places.
Why is that?
Because some places have landmines and other explosives.
As with the people of the Vani, Tamil civilians in Jaffna have lived much of this war either on the run or trapped as virtual prisoners of war. Today, the occupying forces are government soldiers. But Jaffna has long held special significance in the minds of Tamil people. It was the main Tamil centre before the war and has been fiercely fought over. Little of the old town remains intact. These are among the only images left of Jaffna. Jaffna's main library was burnt to the ground during one of the many battles played out on these streets. The Tigers once controlled Jaffna. The government only regained it in 1995 after a 5-month battle. But the greatest impact of the war may not be the number of people killed or the physical destruction, but rather the impact on those who have survived.
But at that time you thought your sister was was harming you. Only your sister or your mother also? Only sister.
Professor Somasundaran is Jaffna's one and only trained psychiatrist.
We find that about 27% of the population are having symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
This hospital is temporary. In this war, institutions have also been displaced. Professor Somasundaran says patients suffering post-traumatic stress re-experience the horror of what has happened to them over and over again.
For example, if it's a landmine victim who has lost his limb due to a landmine explosion, even after the event, maybe 1 week or 1 month or several months later, he goes through the experience of as if it's happening again. It's real for him. It's like a video replay. The whole thing is happening again in front of his eyes. He sees he's walking there, suddenly the explosion, then he's lying with a bleeding stump, and then he's been taken to hospital. And that happens again and again.
And he says the impact that has on society is impossible to quantify.
So here also we are dealing with a kind of a trauma that has been chronic, going on for years, and also multiple. For example, displacements are multiple. There's not only one displacement, but again and again. And the trauma is also multiple. Deaths in the family, somebody is detained and maybe tortured. So the effects of this collective trauma is much more pernicious. It sort of spreads out, affecting not only individual members but families and the community.
The facilities here at this temporary hospital are basic. The small team that administers care does what it can with what it can. Professor Somasundaran says incidents of torture continue to arise on both sides.
Earlier, I would say almost torture was a routine procedure. Anybody who is detained would undergo torture, just like registration of their name and so on.
And while the Sri Lankan military has been the worst offender in terms of the number of people subjected to torture, the tiger's appetite for revenge disturbs him.
What is very strange to me, or perhaps difficult to psychologically comprehend, is sometimes his methods are used much more severely on people of their own community than on people of the other who are supposed to be the enemies.
More than half of Jaffna's current estimated population of 500,000 people do not live in their own homes. At Innerville, on the outskirts of Jaffna, many of the families here have spent more than a decade in cramped and very basic temporary housing. What makes displacement harder to bear is the knowledge that their homes are intact, not far away, but in an area defined as a high security zone which has placed them under military control.
எல்லாம் பாதிக்கப்பட்ட நிலையில நாங்க பொம்பளையால் வீட்டுல முடமா இருக்கிறோம். ஆம்பளையால் ஒரு 50 ரூபாய் உழைச்சி கொண்டு வர நேரத்தில் இந்த நிவாரணத்தோட சீவிக்கிறோம். எங்களுக்கு நிவாரணம் இந்த வேலையங்கிற ஊருக்கு விட்டா.
For some, the ceasefire has raised hopes high enough to inspire direct and very dangerous action. In Puthukudiyirrppu town, that's what people are doing, taking huge risks to go home.
The ceasefire is not sure. Today is a ceasefire, tomorrow is a fight. What to do?
But to set foot in this town is a very dangerous proposition. It has not been cleared of
You You have a lot of signs that you'll find all over the town warning people of landmines. This is one in Tamil warning people of landmines, but still you have people. I mean, the very fact that people are here, quite a few though, but shows that how desperate people are just to come back and find a way to survive.
This man is one who is willing to take the risk, although he won't be calling for his family to join him until he knows it's safe.
அந்த 2 நாளில் நாங்கள் வீட்டு உடமையால் வீட்டு பொருட்கள் எல்லாம் விட்டு சண்டைக்கான ஓடினாங்க. அப்போ போய் இப்படி தான் கூலி வேலையில் அது வேலை இல்லாமல் சாப்பாட்டு பிரச்சனை அப்புறம் நிவாரணம் கொடுத்தா அப்புறம் அப்படி இப்படி நிவாரண இதெல்லாம் அப்படி தான் நாங்கள் பெரிய கஷ்டப்பட்டு தான் வாழ்ந்தாங்க. ஏண்டா
Hopes for peace remain high amongst those who have paid the most for this 2 decades-long power struggle. There is no doubt that a shocking price has been exacted. But people here also know it can be dangerous to hope too much.
A lot of people have hoping that this whole thing will come to an end. So if the whole thing collapses, there will be a sudden letdown. I mean, this has happened so many times, so people are much more cautious now. But still, it's human nature. You know, we have been through this so much. We just hope that this craziness will end.